Hi there guys, and welcome to another edition of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. Just continuing to plough on through my free agency reviews, with the first wave free agency having wrapped up. This episode will be focusing on the team with the number one overall draft pick, the Cleveland Browns. So last season, of course, a one-win season. There's not a lot of positives that can be taken. Expectations were, of course, low. Heck of a lot of young players on that team. The trade down to really accrue more picks. The team, it's clearly embraced the full-on rebuild mode. So as you might expect, the team, for the most part, comprised of rookies, second-year players. Really struggled. Were quite competitive in some games early on, but as the year wore on, some injuries built up. The team sort of started to crumble and really struggled. Got very fortunate, to be honest, to win the game that they did against the Chargers, and at the end of the day, is one of the least talented teams overall that I've probably seen take to an NFL field. Had an interesting trade, to get Jamie Collins from the Patriots midway through the year. He gives them a very talented player, so there's something to build around. But as I say, this roster is one of the weakest I've seen. They've got an absolute bundle of draft picks over the next 2 years, so hard to judge Hugh Jackson, Sashi Brown, and all the front office crew there. They're clearly, taking a whole new direction to see if they can finally resurrect this once proud franchise. So in terms of needs, I've given 2 or 3 needs what I listed for most teams. Going to free agency, sort of the main ones. Really, for the Browns, I can pretty much just say all of it. They need talent at just about every spot on the field. Of course, as the major positions, quarterback must be addressed. They need pass rushers. They need more weapons. It's hard to be specific. This team just needs to, find talent and then figure things out from there. Because at this point, this team is not going to be competing for a playoff spot. So in terms of the additions they've made, they've made some interesting ones. I feel like you could say they're taking the approach that I think the Tennessee Titans and the Cowboys have taken in recent years, and really trying to strengthen up front. I guess they're going to try and find, the running back and the quarterback to play behind them. They've first off made the massive deal, making Kevin Zeitler, formerly of the Bengals, the highest paid guard in the league, with a 5-year, $60 million deal, $31.5 million. Again, going back to, I had some free agency predictions going into it. I did think Zeitler was going to become the highest paid guard in football based on his age. He's 26, 27. Still absolutely very much in his prime. Has been a very, very good player in his time with the Bengals, a Pro Bowl sort of talent. These are the kind of guys that, you expect to see these kind of contracts handed to. Going to the Browns, not a huge shock, with Hugh Jackson there. Would have worked with him in his time with the Bengals. Getting a key player from a division rival as well. Really good move. He'll be there for a while. The interior of that line really struggled. Great move. Obviously, the money's large, but, this is what I said. This team needs to get talent by any means necessary. Paying out for a top talent is something that they got the cap room. But even if another team had done it, I wouldn't be too critical. This is a really, really good player. They should get, their full money's worth out of him over the next 5 years. They also re-signed guard Joel Bitonio. Another very large contract for a guard. 5 years, $51 million, 23 guaranteed. He's been a really good player for them when he's been healthy. The when being the issue. If he can stay healthy, I would expect him and Zeitler to be the premier tandem of guards, or at least in that discussion over the next few years. Also on the interior of that line, JC Tretter, just so I can sort of wrap it up and talk about the 3 of them. the centre formerly of the Green Bay Packers. 3 years, $16.5 million. It performed well last year. It can be a bit of a mirage on that Packers line because they're a very talented bunch, so it can be kind of hard to evaluate any one individual piece. But he's a solid player. It's a perfectly reasonable contract. I think they should be, that ends the Cam Irving at centre experiment, which has been an unmitigated disaster for them. So that's a real positive there. With Joe Thomas, still on that line, this attacking that spot, as I say, clearly I think the Titans, they were in a similar position a couple of years ago. Of course, they've got Mariota now, which is, helps with in terms of things trending up and looking more positive if you can get a quarterback with some potential. But they built a very good offensive line around him. They have Taylor Lewan, was a first round pick. Chance Warmack, now he's no longer with the team, but he was a top 10 pick. Of course, last year getting Decker on the right side. That was a first round pick that I believe they traded up to get him. So it's a concerted effort. Similar thing, again, that's exactly what the Cowboys did. Invested heavily in the offensive line. I feel like that's what the Browns have done. I think this will pay off for them if they can get the pieces around them in place. But certainly on paper, this looks like it's got the potential to be one of the top 5 offensive lines in all of football. Obviously, Joe Thomas is, in my opinion, he's the best left tackle I personally have probably seen. Having seen him from a pass protection perspective, I remember the latter years of John Ogden and Walter Jones. They were fantastic players, but I've seen Joe Thomas from day one, and having him, this pair of guards, it should be a very, very effective offensive line. I'm sure whoever ends up playing quarterback for them next year will quite enjoy doing so. We also had a very interesting acquisition. I've never seen this before in the NFL. Someone will have to let me know if something similar has ever occurred in a move not unlike something you would see in the NBA in terms of a salary cap dump. We've got Brock Osweiler, the premier free agency bust of last season, bringing a second round draft pick with him to the Browns. A very interesting move. Hard to be critical of the Browns. Of course, they have the cap room, historic amount of cap room heading into this year's free agency period. Essentially, they've taken a rental on Brock Osweiler and gotten a second round pick for it. Wonderful move for him. Another pick, whether they want to use that to try and package some kind of deal together to go find a quarterback or another talented player elsewhere. Because that's what I keep hearing. They've got all this, all this draft currency. They're going to use it to go get a quarterback. Frankly, they've got so much of it. They can use it to pretty much. They can go after a lot of things. If there's a team, that's got 2 solid players at an individual, position, they can go after them. So it'll be interesting to see how they use those draft picks, because I think it's an unprecedented kind of number, particularly in the first and second round over the next couple of years. Osweiler, whether he competes for the starting job, I don't know. Based on what I saw last year, no, he was on a far more talented Texans team. If you're going to struggle on that team, then heaven knows what you're going to do with the talent around you in Cleveland at the moment. In spite of that, what looks like it's going to be a stellar offensive line. And the other move, this one I'm a little more sceptical of. So one of the big stories, I guess, with the Browns last year was the emergence of Terrell Pryor as a legitimate number 1 receiver. Very impressive, converting a college quarterback like that. He was fantastic. He's gone. So in an effort to replace him, they have paid Kenny Britt $32 million over 4 years. Now, Britt is a really frustrating kind of player to evaluate, because one week he will look like a legitimate number 1 receiver in the NFL, making tough catches. He's a big physical player, can go win those 50-50 balls, but other games he just looks disinterested. He's got inconsistent hands. It's the kind of player I'm more willing to give a pass to if it's like a competitive team signing them, because I think success can motivate players like that, but this looks like a player who's just gone there for money. He's not been reliable at any point during his career, in spite of having a couple of really stellar seasons early on with the Tennessee Titans. Wouldn't be too happy about this move if I were a Browns fan. I think this is one, they've got the money to spend, but I don't believe it should be wasted. I suspect this one will be a waste. I've got to be harsh on this one. I don't know what Kenny Britt has done outside of the odd flash of talent to warrant a contract of this kind of calibre. So, why they weren't in the market for Pryor, I'm not necessarily sure. There was word that he would be happy to stay in Cleveland if they'd given him that contract. He only took a 1-year prove-it deal in Washington for that similar kind of money, $8 million there. That should have been a focus. This is a strange move to me. So discuss the Pryor loss. Nothing else major in terms of that. They've cut Robert Griffin III. I personally think his career in the NFL is done. Didn't show me anything last season. I understand this team was not good, but just did not look like an NFL quarterback, not even a capable backup. We've heard a lot of things about his work ethic, and his apparently he can be quite arrogant, and his personality isn't the easiest to work with. So with all that being the case, and based on what I saw on film last year, I saw a guy who doesn't look like he played a pro game in his life. I think his time in the NFL is done. In terms of what the Browns have done overall, reasonable. Was probably expecting them to be a bit more active. Not going to criticise them for not. Outside of the Kenny Britt deal, perfectly reasonable signings. That offensive line looks great now. Still a ton of needs. Clearly, the amount of draft picks they've got, they're going to look to address them. Of course, quarterback still looms large. Cody Kessler was somewhat impressive last year. But I don't know if you're going to be able to convince the people of Cleveland that, you're going to build a winner around him. Whether, they go after Kirk Cousins, Jimmy Garoppolo's been thrown around a lot as somebody they really like. I'm not so sure. Like most people, I expect Myles Garrett to be the first overall pick, so maybe they go get a quarterback with their second pick. I'm not sure if I personally like any of the quarterbacks in that spot, especially if you're going to start them day one on a team that's somewhat talent deprived, shall we say. But I think some positives for sure. Haven't just spent money for the sake of it, outside of the one deal that I'm not a fan of. All round plus free agency thus far for the Browns. I expect to see them being a bit more active over the next couple of weeks, of course, as the prices start to die down a little bit. Still needs, outside the offensive line, which I think I can say now that's a pretty reasonable spot. Other than that, needs across the board still. And they did miss out on a couple of players. Actually, I neglected to mention Tony Jefferson was one of them they were apparently interested in. He rejected them to go to the Ravens. I feel bad for the Browns fans. Buccaneers, we were in this spot not too long ago. Very talent-deprived roster. I suppose fortunately, in the year we had the first overall pick, there was a quarterback deemed, a franchise quarterback coming out. So it's not an enviable spot to be in. I really like Myles Garrett, if that makes him feel any better. Physically kind of reminds me of Julius Peppers. If they get a player of that caliber, I'm sure they'll be happy with that pick. I've never seen a team with this many picks. It'll be fascinating following them in the next couple of years, trying to see a team basically build from zero. The closest we'll probably get to an expansion franchise without them actually being an expansion franchise. So definitely going to be a fascinating team to follow in the draft. What do you guys think? How do you feel the brain trust in Cleveland is going about this rebuild? Do you think it's a solid approach? Do you think they should perhaps be going after a bit more veteran talent, even if it is just to tide the roster over for the next couple of seasons? How far do you think this team is from competing? And what do you think they should do to address this quarterback position? Because it's a tough position to be in right now, being a franchise in need of one. As always, drop me some comments, get in touch with us via Twitter. over the channel Facebook page. I'll do my best to get back to everyone I possibly can. Always willing to take episode suggestions. Like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon and all that good stuff. Pleasure as always, guys. Check out some more of my videos if you enjoyed this one, and go Bucks.